You're listening to The Last Easy Mile, a show for men who know there's more waiting but aren't sure where to begin. I'm Josh Farahi. Whether it's carving out space for adventure, being a more present and intentional father, reconnecting with your physical edge, or rediscovering a forgotten skill, this podcast is about moving from stuck to in motion. Each episode explores that in-between moment, right before the leap, when the excuses run out and something real needs to begin. We cover fatherhood, work, faith, creativity, and what it means to keep showing up, especially when no one's coming to rescue you. Welcome to The Last Easy Mile. Let's walk it together. Get about halfway through and be like, John, I got some bad news. We didn't press the record button. But yeah, I certainly appreciate you coming on. Time, as I say to everyone, is our most precious commodity, and giving it to me and this platform, I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank you for your service. I know
Thank you.
you've been in the military north of a quarter century, so this country owes folks like you a debt of gratitude. So thanks for that. But you've trained Navy SEALs, you've hunted in remote wilderness and taught survival for decades. Tell us a little bit about how, your story and especially training Navy SEALs and what they're like.
Yeah, well, the story is, it didn't start out necessarily like like it ended, but I grew up in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio, and just kind of in the Rust Belt, living like a lot of small suburban towns and playing sports. My dad, he hunted a bit for some birds, but nobody ever big game hunted in my family. But for whatever reason, I was really attracted to archery hunting, and in Ohio, that really the only big game animals, whitetail, which, are prolific, but as a self-taught archery hunter, I'm thinking this had to be, early to mid 80s. Um, you know, there was information out there, but not a ton. And I didn't know anybody to ask. So long story short, like I had a great time, never ended up killing anything, but, so I did that, and I was just always seeking adventure, playing sports, the whole thing. But, ultimately after, I would say, a failed attempt to play college football, and I just really wasn't into it is really where the failure came in. I never really got as far as to even test myself, enlisted in the Navy, and it became a Navy diver, a deep sea diver, and really just you always want what you don't have. So I always wanted to be in San Diego or Hawaii, on the beach
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. And, on the infinite wisdom of the military, ended up in the Philippines, which in hindsight was actually a wonderful way to start my career. Just a small group of guys and a lot of experience gained, and came back to the States and went to a second advanced diving school. Went to a command on the East Coast and started doing, continued diving and started doing a little more, deeper dives and things like that. So just kind of pursuing that whole thing. And then got my first opportunity to go to a training command and be an instructor, teaching Navy SEALs how to dive teaching people how to dive this oxygen rebreather that Navy SEALs used. Navy SEALs already knew how to use it, but then advancing that and teaching Navy SEALs how to get in and out of submarines underwater, while the submarine is moving, et cetera. And it was far different then than it is now. It's much more advanced and has been for quite a while. But at the time, it was still, you'd cram a bunch of dudes into something maybe the size of, probably be the equivalent of 2 phone booths, if anybody knows what a phone booth is, or a small closet, a small closet. You'd get in there, and the only light would be this red light. So, not a lot of light, but enough. You'd get in there, you'd close these hatches. Of course, it's cold. There's all kinds of noises, and you start breathing on a regulator. So you breathe on air. And what they do is they basically flood this closet So now you're in there packed with a bunch of guys.
My
There's a
God.
rolled up boat. There might be an outboard motor, of course, all your weapons, etc. And then eventually they're able to equalize the pressures
Right.
to the outside, and then you can open up that hatch and then swim to the surface. And there's a whole process in that. So that was like super cool. And I wanted to kind of continue down that path because the diving was just so different and intriguing to me, and something I hadn't done before. And so I eventually got to San Diego 9 years after I started my career, and went to an operational SEAL team running what they called submarine operations. It's their diving locker. And that was all about combat swimming, and did a lot of that. But this is pre 9/11. So on my weekends, still had plenty of time off, and started pursuing, my other interest and passion at the time, which was, rock climbing and, big rocks like El Capitan, and climbing mountains and skiing off them, and those kinds of things, and thought maybe I'd become a mountain guide and maybe get out of the Navy. I was kind of
Mm-hmm.
running out of interesting things that I wanted to do. And then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, I just happened to be one of the people, a dozen of us, that was chosen to go up to Alaska and basically restructure. We had a small training facility there, restructure the training, build the equipment to get those guys, not that year, but like 02, 03, get them in the best gear with the best tactics and procedures we could come up with at the time to get them into Afghanistan. So, anyways, long story short, how did I go from the ocean to the mountains? That's how. Uh, 9/11 changed everyone's lives, certainly mine, and that's how it started. And then for the next 13 years, well, 12, I guess, whatever it is, I just, kind of head down and just pursued that. We taught a course up there that was 30 days long. Then we started taking our show on the road. We'd meet platoons wherever they wanted to meet us, high altitude environments, cold weather environments, whatever it is, and then started teaching more advanced tactics. At
And
the same,
sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
the reason that the military tactically wanted you up in the mountains is because Afghanistan does have some taller mountains. Was that the thinking at the time? Was it the elevation of the terrain in Afghanistan, or was it all around training?
No, it was specifically about the environment. So
Right.
I had, yeah, I've skipped a lot, of course, in this
Oh
little,
no, that's okay. Yeah,
but
naturally.
I had become known on the West Coast for teaching SEAL platoons what they
Hmm.
called cliff assault, because I told you I was rock climbing and things on the
Right.
weekends. I was actually pursuing becoming a mountain guide. And so, the thing I loved about the SEAL teams was that if you had something to provide and you were willing to provide it, that they would use you, right? And so
Right.
that's how a diver became, a guy teaching climbing. But I started teaching, cliff assault's an odd thing, and how you apply it in the military. You climb at night. Maybe you climb on night vision, you climb with weapons, you climb quietly, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's all kinds of tactics involved. So I had kind of gotten this reputation on the east or the west coast of doing that. I had actually gone to Alaska and worked with that instructor cadre up there a few times when they needed somebody to fill in, because my reputation was starting to precede me. And so I was just one of the people they picked because I was current on the latest kind of civilian ways to apply things. I had already begun starting to apply those tactics and procedures to the SEAL teams, and now we had to figure out how to apply it in this winter environment, this high altitude mountainous environment. So the Hindu Kush is part of the Himalayan mountain range. So,
Right.
we're talking extremely severe
Yep.
terrain. And, in the government's infinite wisdom, as always, we were solely focused on the desert, which we eventually got into in Iraq, which I had nothing to do with. But this whole high altitude mountain environment really caught everyone by surprise, as it seems to always. And then the kind of the cold weather, winter warfare, institutional knowledge from the Cold War had basically retired, and all that gear had been, stored away and became obsolete. So we really had to
Hmm.
start from scratch, build the clothing, build the gear, build the tactics, and then start to transfer that knowledge and, kind of continue to iterate that. Sometimes almost, every couple months, you get post-op reports from overseas. You're like, okay, well, we need to do this. We need to do that. Our guys are, working in smaller groups or bigger groups. How do we kind of flex?
Right.
So that was the military side. But then I started taking, like, again, I said that kid who started archery hunting, I started to take those, I started to take the opportunity, when I had started to get a little time, which was not much, but living on Kodiak Island, living in Alaska, you get the opportunity right out your front door. I
Sure.
started taking those lessons that I was learning as far as how to survive in these harsh environments and the clothing we were using and all those things and applying it to my hunting. And so that's really where I started to pursue, moose and caribou and Dall sheep and grizzly bears and brown bears and blacktail and all that kind of stuff in my spare time. And so it was just, my wife and I do not have children. My wife was in the Air Force. So, basically my work life and we'll call it my civilian life, it
Hmm.
just all blurred. And
Sure.
for over a decade, that's just basically all I did.
Wow. I mean, listen, you're on Kodiak Island. I mean, I've heard some wild things about there. I've never visited Alaska, but
They're
I,
probably all true.
yeah, that's right. It's certainly on the list of things I want to do for sure. But it's a wild place.
Yeah,
And
it's
then so
incredibly remote, very wild, incredibly harsh weather. A lot of brown bears, which aren't necessarily a problem, but they definitely, keep you aware of your
yeah,
surroundings. Yeah.
yeah. Brown bear are scary for sure. I mean, those are big killing machines. Those guys. Yeah. And then so eventually, after the military and then spending that time outdoors, you hooked up with Sitka to help put together gear for them.
Yeah, people ask me, and I've talked to a lot of folks that are transitioning out of the military, and they always ask, like, how'd you do it? Seemed like you were so successful and it so easy. And of course, I was blessed. There's no doubt about that, but it's never quite as easy as it looks. But yeah, I had a guy. So, it was time to retire. Needed to move on. Needed to get the old blood out and some new blood in, some new ideas. And so, everybody has to, you either come to that conclusion or you're forced to come to that conclusion. So,
Hmm.
leaving on my own terms, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Wanted to get into the hunting industry, but you know, didn't have any contacts, didn't really know anything about it. And a friend of mine who I'd work with, who uh, who was in the government, former military guy, he gave me my first chance at a small company called Beyond Clothing in Seattle, Washington. And I was living in. My wife and I moved to Salt Lake. We had bought a house, but I started to commute to Seattle once a week. And the job I took was, this product line manager, which I didn't really know what that meant. But Rick said, come on over. It's a small company. I'll teach you. We really don't have a product manager. You're going to help me out. And he really put me in charge of the small niche part of the business, which was essentially doing what I'd been doing, building these clothing and survival systems for top tier special operations units, the British SAS, again, some tier one units. So started doing that and kind of understanding the lingo and the business. And, in the military, in the government, we don't really we don't really sell things, we buy things. And so I'd only known how to buy things, not sell things. And so I had to learn how to sell my ideas, sell the product. I had to learn how to work with women for the first time for the most part. I
Yeah,
never really worked with women. And so all
that's
these
interesting.
things.
Yeah.
And in that process, I did find of an opportunity at SITKA Gear for what I ended up getting as the big game product manager. Little did I know that it was the first person ever to do it and that I was essentially taking over from the founder. And so long story short, I got the job after 11 months of kind of going back and forth and kind of getting turned down the first time. And when I stepped into SITKA Gear in January 2015, I was the 12th full-time employee in the building. So it's a
Wow.
very small company and we punch way above our weight, way above our weight. But it gave me an opportunity to get in on the ground floor, so to speak, where, I could learn from my colleagues, but they could learn from me. And so they taught me business, and I taught them how to test gear. I taught them how to vet product and how to build to these uncompromising standards. And so it was kind of a great marriage of those kind of
Yeah,
ideologies and
synergistic.
understanding.
Yeah.
Very much so. Very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah. So I lucked out. And so 10 and a half years later, here I am still at SITKA
Mhm.
and just kind of continuing to advance the ball.
Well, congrats on the success there. Sitka is one of the most respected in the game right now, and
Yeah.
yeah, you
No,
guys
thanks.
produce really good stuff. So my buddy that I hunt with and stuff, he's very into the Sitka stuff, and you guys have really good stuff. So but you also now, I mean, and which was kind of the topic of what I want to discuss with you was really survival and um, being your own rescue. I think is really part of your ethos. So tell me about what you're up to in that front, and are you're teaching classes, and are they online and in person? I believe. Are you doing any in person, or
I'm
are
not
they
really
mostly
doing any in-person classes yet.
okay?
It's something I've kind of got on my radar. I've got a few other projects. A lot of it is online. I'm working, so during COVID, I was working from home. We were told to go home and work. So I did, and
Hmm.
I had a little more time on my hands. And so I was I was getting frustrated by some of the, I'll say marketing in the hunting industry and how people were portraying themselves, but more importantly, their gear. And I just knew that it just what people were saying wasn't true, and that I thought that the consumer wasn't kind of getting the best information, and that I realized I had a unique perspective, and that maybe I had something to offer that maybe other people, you know, weren't offering. And so I kind of begrudgingly started Instagram page with all kinds of. I could have, if I was smart enough, which I wasn't, to do a blooper reel. That alone would be all I'd need to put on YouTube. So, anyways, but the whole intent of the platform is just to, once a week, give a video, giving some type of information or knowledge about anything outdoors. A lot of it is not related to hunting. It's everything peripheral to hunting. It's how to clothe yourself, feed yourself, how to survive, how to be there and put yourself in position to actually take advantage of the shot, so to speak, right? I'm not
Right.
necessarily going to tell you how to bugle, but I will tell you how to be there and be proficient and cognitively aware to make the best decisions and, to bugle when appropriate. So I started that, and then that has really continued to snowball. I've got a website. I've partnered with some brands like Montana Knife Company. We've got uh, well, I've done 52 videos for them. They're going to launch one a week for the foreseeable future, for the next year. I've got two courses with outdoor class now. I'm doing a third. I'm scheduled to do more, and I do a lot of seminars. I give seminars at a lot of these conservation shows, Western Hunter, Wild Sheep Foundation. I just came back from Pope and Young, those kinds of things. And so really my platform is really all about outdoor education, and some of it is hunting specific. A lot of it you can take and apply however and wherever you want, and kind of take or take what you want, leave what you want. And so that has honestly been more rewarding and fulfilling than I ever imagined.
Right.
It's my platform. I like to say this is my relief valve. I like to say that because it's mine, I reserve the right to quit at any time.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really it's really fun. I've got some big projects I'm working on, but that again, interestingly enough, that on my personal life and my job at Sitka, again, I'm blurring the lines between,
Hmm.
my work life and my, I'll still say my civilian life, because it's
Sure.
just my passion. I mean, at this point, I don't think I can deny that.
Yeah.
And I just really get a lot of fulfillment out of it.
Yeah. No, good stuff. I mean, who doesn't like being in the outdoors, and with the knowledge you have, I mean, you can really impact people. So that's an amazing thing. I wish I could spend my time outdoors, I wish my office was outside. So,
Yeah, no, me
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. So, what do guys I mean, look, it's not often someone like me can get into the mind, even for an hour, of someone like you to say, like, "Okay, we're going out hiking, fishing, hunting, whatever it is." What do most people do wrong? What do you suggest people need to know or understand? Because nature will come and sneak up from behind you and kick your ass. And most of us that go outside, and I'm probably, guilty of it myself. I figure I have my, Garmin, and I'm cool, but and I may not be prepared. So what do you recommend for people as the ABCs of getting smart?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the Garmin, our set cell phones, like they're great products, and you should absolutely have them. I would say the first thing is that we need to understand knowledge weighs nothing, and so the more knowledge that we acquire, it doesn't take up any weight or room in our pack. And so the more knowledge you have, the more confident, not arrogant, but the more confident you become, and the more you can adapt to this dynamic environment that we call the outdoors. And it really doesn't matter if you're, going to walk the dog 3 miles up a trail, or go on a trail run, or hike to a high lake to go fish, or go on this, huge expedition, be it climbing, hunting, whatever it is. You should continually acquire knowledge, be inquisitive, and just try to arm yourself with as much of that as possible. And then I think the second one is that I think it's unwise and unrealistic to think that it can't happen to you. It can happen to any of us. And when I say it, I mean some type of incident. And I'm not saying life or death necessarily,
Right.
but I think it's not a question of if, but when. And I think the more time we spend outdoors, the more likely something's going to happen. That could be cutting yourself, twisting your ankle, right? It doesn't
Hmm.
have to be a bear attack. It could be, you know, falling down a cliff. It could be, man, you know what? I dropped my phone in the creek when I was filling my water bottle up, and my
Hmm.
phone fizzed out, and now I don't have a map, and I'm really not sure where I am. And so I'm going to have to spend the night out here and wait till daylight to kind of figure out where I am to get back to the truck. And so when you have some knowledge, and then you realize with a kind of a clear understanding that it could happen to you, then you take just some very, what I consider, basic precautions, not paranoid, not overburdening yourself with product, but just understanding that if you have a few pieces of clothing and what I call a possibles pouch, armed with that knowledge and this realistic understanding that it might happen, and it might happen, if you and I are out together, it might happen to you, or
Right.
it might happen to me, and I'm relying on you, right? And so we
Sure.
have almost this bond to kind of help each other. Maybe it's a total stranger I come across on a trail, that essentially with, I consider this possibles pouch we could get into, but a possibles pouch, a puffy jacket, and a rain jacket, maybe a pair of rain pants, but basically we'll just say rain gear, that with those couple things, I can survive an incident. I can weather a storm. I can ride out the night while, I ping my inReach and say, Josh, I'm at such and such, or hey, remember where we, killed that bull last year? Like,
Hmm.
I'm half a mile
Right.
to the south from there. Come help me out. I broke my ankle. And then you can manage that. And so that potentially, you know, dare I say, survival situation just becomes, an incident, an inconvenience, and a cool story to tell later on in life. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's so funny you say just bring a possibles pouch, because I think most of us that go out, we pack our stuff full of crap we probably don't need, and think about that as something that, we're going to lean into if something goes wrong. Um, but do you have resources? I know your website is Knowledge by Storm, I believe.
Knowledge from
Is that
storms. Yep.
Knowledge from Storm? Forgive me.
Yep. Yep.
Um, you're teaching these things kind of step by step, right? And helping people, like, for example, one segment you had, and I don't know if this was on your Instagram or on your website, but your solution for this problem, and I'll walk through it, was the exact opposite of what I would have done. Just to give an example of how little, even as an outdoorsman, I go out all the time. Um, I would have just swung and missed on this situation. So you set up a situation where you were, crossing a river and you were fully submerged. It's, fall time, winter time. It's freezing outside, and you're walking through how and what to do in that in that situation. And prior to me having, watched this video of yours, I would have, took off all my clothes and hung it out to dry and got, into my sleeping bag. But you actually are adding layers on your wet clothes and then getting into the tent. And so walk us through that as an example of something that's counterintuitive, but is the right way to do it.
Yeah, so today's technology, especially in clothing, is amazing. The performance it provides is unlike anything we've ever had. And this was part of tying back to what I started to do when I was in the military. Obviously, I do it at SITKA. Um, if I will claim anything unique that I've done, it's bring this what we call the rewarming drill that we used to teach in the military. I brought that to the hunting industry. So that's about all I can claim. But you can find one of those videos on SITKA's YouTube page. We just launched one with Montana Knife Company. I did one with Eastman's Hunting. I've got one on my YouTube channel. And essentially what that shows is kind of a worst case scenario where, as you described, I'm out there, I'm crossing a log, I've fallen up to my waist, I'm 3 miles from the truck and it's almost dark. Or, we flipped the raft going down the river in the Frank Church. As we're fishing, the raft goes away, we end up on shore. What do we do? And with technical clothing, and I have to kind of state that and put a bit of an asterisk there,
Hmm.
not, hey, I'm wearing jeans and a cotton t-shirt and a flannel, but
Hmm.
with technical clothing, understanding your survival priorities, the rule of threes: 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Understanding that shelter is your number one survival priority, and that in a cold weather environment, not talking permissible weather where, we can just take our clothes off, get a suntan, and let them dry in the
Sure.
breeze,
Yeah.
that clothing is our first line of defense against the elements. And so the last thing you really want to do, but of course, that's our, you know, what we think we should do is take those clothes off. And in actuality, that clothing is although wet, is protecting us a little bit from the wind, and it's trapping a little bit of our body heat. And so, depending on what you have in your pack, if you just strip off your clothes, well, now what? If you sit there and don't put any more clothes on and try to build a fire, depending on how cold it is, what you have in your possibles pouch, how good you are at making a fire, the environmental conditions you're in, your hands may not work after 5 minutes. You may start to get hypothermic in, 15 minutes and not be able to build that fire. Whereas, as you'll see, and you've seen in the videos, if I've got that puffy jacket, if I've got that rain gear, the first thing I want to do is put that clothing on. And technical clothing is going to be able to manage that moisture. And that's going to allow me to do a couple things. Can now that I've insulated myself, protected myself from the wind, can I now say, all right, it's only 2 miles down the trail, I'm back to my truck? Or it's a mile and a half back to my tent, my base camp? Or am I really kind of screwed here, but I've got, because we're backpack hunting, I've got everything on my back and I just need to set up my tent and get inside and try to control the situation, right?
Hmm.
Kind of take care of the immediacy of getting out of the elements, understanding that's my first survival priority. And so you do that, and then you walk. Okay, I'm going to walk out. Okay, I'm going to set up my tent and get inside my sleeping bag and start to dry out. I'm going to have a hot drink and a hot meal and kind of stoke my metabolism, and my body heat is going to push the moisture out. And once I stabilize that situation, all right, we're going to be here all night. You know what, Josh? We're good now. We're not shivering. We've got a full belly. Let's get out. Now let's make a fire. right?
Right.
And
Right.
so understanding those survival priorities allows me to react. And then having that knowledge I talked about, which is critical, allows me to stay calm, not overreact, not panic, make the right decision, um, to stop potentially a bad decision that got me into the situation, stop that cascading effect of poor decisions, stop it
Right.
where it can be, and try to reverse course, right? And so there's a lot to this, to that
Right.
answer, but that's what I'm trying to promote. That's what I'm trying to teach based on seeing thousands of people do it in all kinds of insane conditions. And then, of course, you never want to take, a shooting course from a guy who won't shoot in front of you, or,
Right.
uh, a quarterback coach who can't throw the ball. And so
Right.
I've demonstrated this numerous times on lots of platforms if
No,
people
I
want to
can
check it
vouch.
out.
I saw you in the video. You were fully submerged. And sometimes it's the second bad decision that gets you,
It's
or the
often the second
second.
bad one.
Okay,
Yeah.
right,
hmm
right. So when you say technical gears, so let's drill in on that a little bit. Is that something that's only available through Sitka, or is it now more across the board? What qualifies as technical gear?
Yeah. So no, it's not just with Sitka. I would say, most of the hunting brands out there now have technical gear. Do I think we have the best? Of course. Do I think we use the best
Mm,
ingredients? Yes. Best fit, etc. But also the outdoor industry writ large has a lot of great technical gear. Kind of let's define that as something that has polyesters and nylons, wool base layers, synthetic or treated down insulations, those kind of things. Gore-Tex rain gear. What does not qualify as technical clothing and is the biggest shift, in the last 25 years, and I could give you an example here in a minute, but is that no cotton. Cotton does not qualify. Denim, flannel,
mhm,
canvas, none of that qualifies as technical gear. And so I don't know how many years ago, over 30 years ago now, right? I remember getting my first set of Gore-Tex rain gear in the military,
mhm.
and you kind of knew you were kind of you thought you were a big deal when you got that. Well, the old woodland pattern. But back in the day, although there was a huge paradigm shift trending towards what we now call technical gear, that Gore-Tex was really intended to protect you and the cotton BDUs or cotton uniform that you would wear out in the field. So it's like,
Mhm.
oh, it's windy, put on the Gore-Tex. Oh, it's
Cortex, yeah.
wet, put on the Gore-Tex. And what that would do is basically try to stop the cotton from getting wet. But God help you if it did, you didn't have any way of drying out in the field. You were, going to become a statistic. You were going to become, a casualty, or you were going to have to leave the field. Then we got and applied a fleece jacket, and then that fleece jacket had windstopper. And so over the last 30 years, this trend has continued to where everybody has those things now. The mistake I see people make is they focus on, say, the puffy jacket and a pair of soft shell pants, but they're going to have the cotton t-shirt. They're going to have, the cotton Fruit of the Looms, or the old, cotton long johns. And so that's going to be counterproductive to the cause. But if you build a technical system, and it could be built and cobbled together from a lot of different brands, it doesn't have to be one particular brand,
Right.
then that's going to help you. And then one last point is that I'm a huge proponent of whatever you choose to just go out there and train and understand the capabilities and potential limitations of what you have, so that if something happens, when something happens, you know how to react.
Right. So you're recommending actually jumping in a cold river and in fall.
You don't have to. I've got another video on my website, and so it's called the active rewarming drill, but it's something that I promote a lot, and quite frankly, it's something I do a lot when I'm testing clothing for Sitka or testing competitive product to see how it stands up, and or something new or new technology, how it fits in with something we have in a system. Is I'll go to a trailhead, I'll have a bucket of water, I'll have my hiking clothes,
Hmm.
So let's just say, a base layer top, maybe a pair of boxers, depending on the temperature, soft shell pants, active insulative top. Those 4 pieces I will put in the bucket of water at the trailhead. I will soak them, I will submerge them, and then I will, when nobody's looking, I will strip down. I will pull those products out. I will wring them out, and you should be aware of how much water they hold, how quickly, how much you can wring out, how quickly, it starts to drain. But I will put those clothes on. I will put a backpack on, and I will start to hike. I will start to move and generate body heat. Our body is this metabolic engine and the best source of heat, most reliable source of heat we have. And so, just like the furnace in your house pushes heat out to the rest of the house, and you close the windows to keep it in, and you open the windows to let it out, I put that clothing on, and that heat from my body that I've fueled with food and water is going to push that heat out and take moisture with it. And as it takes moisture with it, it potentially takes heat with it. And so you need to regulate your pace, i.e., how much heat you generate or not. And you'd be surprised. I've done this quite a bit. There's actually several videos online, but with the right clothing system, or the clothing system I chose to wear in those videos, within 45 minutes, I'm almost dry. Like,
Wow.
not completely, maybe the bottom of my pant legs or around my waist where my backpack straps are,
Right.
etc. But that goes to show you the capability of a technical clothing system. And so I know that if I'm wearing that and I do fall in crossing the log up to my waist and I'm 3 miles from the truck, I'm like, oh, I got this, because I know that I'm going to walk back, I'm going to warm up, and my pants may be almost dry depending on the environmental conditions by the time I get back to the truck or by the time I get back to my tent.
Sure.
So that's
I think
critical to
what's
know.
Yeah, I think what's important in that though is that you have to be soup to nuts, and no pun intended, in the right gear, right?
Yes,
Right? Because if you're
yeah.
wearing cotton, long johns or whatever, was something I do, then so you really got to get down and layer tactically, I guess would be the right way of saying it.
It would be, but you know, I'm not even promoting unless I the only rule I have with technical clothing is don't wear cotton. But I'm also the person that would say if you want to wear cotton, I'm not going to tell anybody not to do something. What I am telling people to do is if you choose to wear, say, cotton long johns, go and test them within your system and understand the limitations and capabilities of what you've assembled. And then you will know how to react or your actions on if and when something happens. And you're like, oh, I know that, man, I got cotton long johns on. I fell in. These things aren't going to dry. I'm not going to get back to my tent before I am, these things freeze solid.
Right,
I
right.
need to figure out what I want to do. And so, there's a few ways to figure that out, but you need to understand that. And then that drives your actions.
Hmm. That makes sense. What are 2, 3 foundational survival skills every guy should know, um, going out?
So
Do you have like an ABCs that you
I,
like to
I would,
teach?
so we shouldn't rely solely on our phone with a map on there. We shouldn't rely solely on that to understand we'll call it cardinal direction. So a cardinal direction is north, south, east, west. So if I'm going out and I know that I'm going to walk generally north, which means that if I want to get back to the truck, I need to move generally south, and I'll, hopefully hit the road, or that this river that in the area I'm in, this river flows east to west. And so if I hit the river and I'm on the north side or south side, that if I take it left or right, it'll get me, either back to the trailhead, the town, whatever. And if you understand that, it's going to help you move efficiently through the environment, but also I'm not saying you're going to know exactly where you are, but you might not always feel lost if and when this modern technology fails us, runs out of juice, don't have service, didn't download the offline maps, drop it in the creek, whatever the case may be. I think that's the first one. I think the second one is, and the one that we tend to focus on the most, is the ability to make a fire, but not just the ability to make a fire, but the ability to make a fire several ways, and most importantly, probably in inclement weather. So not on permissive weather days, in the campground, around the fire ring, when everything's bone dry, and you strike a match and you've got a roaring bonfire. But whatever you assemble as far as fire making, be it waterproof matches, Bic lighters, windproof lighters, different kinds of fire tinder, be it cotton balls and Vaseline or some type of prefabricated tinder, or you're using natural tinder like pine sap and birch bark, whatever it is, just go and train so that you, again, understand the limitations and capabilities of what you have, but you also have that confidence. So, hey, you know what? We're on a bear hunt. It's inclement weather, and we're going to ride out the afternoon. You know what? I'm going to practice my fire making, and we're going to build a fire for social reasons, but I'm going to practice fire making, and you learn that. But that could potentially save your life. It's not your number one survival priority, but it's a primitive skill I think we should all have and possess. And so there's a lot to that. And then the third one would be, I think we should have some basic medical knowledge and the capability to manage just the more common ailments and injuries. Anything from blisters and diarrhea to a broken bone and some type of laceration or puncture, right? If we're out there hunting, we have weapons, we have knives, we have broadheads, we have guns. And so we should understand how to manage that. And again, if you understand that the ABCs, literally airway, breathing, circulation, then if somebody does cut themselves severely, God forbid somebody gets shot, if somebody breaks an arm or a leg, we can at least stabilize that patient and then sit with them, or if you're by yourself, manage yourself and wait for that safety, that extraction. So those would be the top three I think that come to mind.
Right. And do you carry what kind of first aid do you carry around if you're going on a backpack hunt or you're trying to be bare bones, lightweight backpack?
Yeah, so my possibles pouch, and let me just talk about that for a second. So this kind of, I mean, I was a Boy Scout for a short period of time, but then I'm not saying this to be a Boy Scout. I'm saying this from all my experience in the military, is that this gear that we have access to today is only as good as what we carry in the field. And so this possibles pouch, which some people would call it a survival kit, I call it a possibles pouch because a survival kit is something that is probably going to be the first thing you leave behind. When your pack's full and it's overweight, you're like, well, I don't need this. It's a 1 in a million. I'm going to leave this behind. Whereas a possibles pouch, the name implies, and it came from the mountain men, this is, a kit with capabilities in here to manage my day to day. That could be the 1 in a million, but it could also be the common. It could be the cut. It could be the blister. It could be the headache. It could be the diarrhea. It could be the allergy. It could be all these things, right?
Right.
And so my possibles pouch, and everyone's going to be different, and there's this whole evolution and of how people go about it. But mine's like, I think I just weighed it the other day. It's 2.1 pounds. It comes, I house it in a 2.5 liter fanny pack. It's got 7 capabilities, which I can go into, one of which is my medical kit. And then I build that medical kit for common ailments and injuries, some of which I just rattled off. That has evolved over time based on my medical experience and what I feel I'm capable of. The single biggest mistake any of us make is leaving it behind. And the one time you leave it behind, and that doesn't have to be at your house, it's, I'm going to leave it in my pack and go on this stalk. I'm going to leave it in camp and
Right.
go get water 1,000 feet below. Whatever. I'm not going to, I'm not going to need it on this trip because I'm only going out for an overnight scouting trip. That's when something's going to happen. Um, and so, you know, don't build it to overburden yourself. It's going to evolve. Nobody should be afraid to modify it. My kit has been modified over the years. I can't tell you how many times, from probably way too heavy and way too bulky and way too many capabilities because I had less experience, and I used it as a crutch, to the other extreme where I had capability and confidence, and my ego was bigger than my experience, and so I cut it bare bones. And now it's somewhere in the middle, right? But the capabilities are essentially the top three survival priorities. I have the ability to create shelter outside of my clothing. I consider my puffy jacket and rain jacket part of my survival kit, but I also in my kit have a space blanket. I have some 550 cord generally in there, not my kill kit. And I have a fixed blade knife. With those three things and some knowledge, I can construct some type of natural shelter. I can wrap a
Right.
space blanket around me if I need to. I can use it as a tarp. I can do a lot of things, right? It's primitive, it's crude, but it works. That's my shelter. Then water, I always carry some chlorine dioxide tabs. So, if I am waiting for you to come help me get out, I run out of water. We said, water, 3 days without water. I can hobble over to the creek and refill my Nalgene, but, you know, there's maybe cattle in the area like there is a lot out west, or all I have is some muddy water from potential elk wallow. I drop some chlorine dioxide tabs in there. I'm not worried about, I am worried about getting giardia. I'm not worried about getting symptoms right away, but I don't want to get diarrhea, which is going to dehydrate me. So I got my water, then food. Food's a target of opportunity. Oftentimes I have some type of electrolyte chews, food bar, whatever it is. If I'm in Alaska and I'm in a berry patch, it's an easy thing. But also don't kill a grouse that walks by if you can't build a fire to actually cook it. So I have some snare wire, and I carry a fishing kit if I'm going to be around a body of water. If nothing else, it's cool to train and kind of feed yourself that way. Then I have fire. Fire is a Bic lighter, a windproof lighter, a ferro rod, some prefab tinder, those kind of things. And I spread that out between the possibles pouch and my optics harness, because those are two things I've just trained myself to always have on me unless I'm sleeping. Then we have medical. So my medical kit's in there. It's managed, there to manage the common ailments and injuries. I like to carry a tourniquet. I've been trained on tourniquets. I've seen tourniquets save people's lives. I feel tourniquets are important. But if you don't feel it's needed or necessary, have some way to manage your ABCs, and then diarrhea, allergies, etc. If you have asthma, carry your inhaler, or your EpiPen, whatever the case may be. Then there's some crude signaling. So that could be a signal panel, a signal mirror, a whistle, etc. I'm really a big fan of signal panels. And then there's a few things in there to manage some basic repairs to my gear, my clothing, and possibly my weapon, so that I can stay in the field. And so when you start to look at it like that, that's something I always want with me. And so I'm never caught without. And so the biggest mistake I see people make is they don't carry it. They don't think it's needed. And then that's, of course, when the incident happens.
Right. Yeah,
Yep.
they go out to
Yep.
fill the bucket of water or something.
Yep.
Naturally, that's when you're going to fall down a ravine by yourself.
Always.
Yeah, that's just how
That's
it goes.
how Murphy works. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So zooming out, if you will, what, for like more of a home survival or bug out situation, I know obviously you're trained in the woods and for survival, but what keeps you up at night in that way? I mean, I invited you on a few months back or weeks back, and since then, I'm in LA. We've had riots here. We've entered a limited engagement with the Iranians, and God knows we have sleeper cells because of the last administration's kind of inability to, stop anyone from coming in. So we know that there's domestic threats here. And so I live in a big city, and so I always, I'm thinking, well, what should I be thinking about? What keeps you up at night, and what would you recommend to someone like me who lives in a big city? And I don't know where home is for you.
Yeah, I live
But
in Montana.
You're good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I live in the mountains of Montana. I'm good. What keeps me up at night is an incident happening that traps me away from my home.
Right.
traveling quite a bit like I do. That's
Hmm.
my concern. But I will say that everything we've talked about up to this point is absolutely applicable in any situation, to include zooming out in a more of an urban environment. Now, I don't consider myself necessarily an urban survival expert, but everything we talked about, your survival priorities, being prepared, training, all those things can still be applied. So if all of a sudden I don't have water, or we don't have water in our town, but it's not potable, I should say, there's a good chance I have stove and fuel to boil water. I can do it for
Hmm.
myself, my neighbors. We have pumps, we have filtration, we have chlorine dioxide taps. We can say, hey, don't drink that water because you're going to get diarrhea and make your situation worse. Or if somebody
Sure.
has diarrhea, it's like, oh, I can help stop that because I have some medication in my kit. So what I do is I don't just have that little kit for backpacking, for hunting. I have larger kits
Hmm.
for the situations that you're talking to, right? So I've got a vehicle. If I was, I don't know your exact situation, but I would feel very claustrophobic in that environment,
Hmm.
with the riots and things. And I would be like, you said bug out. It's like, how can I get out of here? Where can I go? What is that? And so is that loading up the truck with those larger capabilities, all those 7 I talked about, your clothing, etc., with some food, and then of course protection, right? However you feel comfortable with that, firearms, things of that sort. I'll be honest, like where I am, I'm sheltering in place. I'm bunkering up here.
Right.
I'm like, come and
Yeah.
get me,
Yeah.
because I'm on my ground. But I think we
Yeah.
all, but now if I'm traveling, I have to figure out a way to get back here, and
Right.
so I think about those things a lot. That's what keeps me up at night. But
Yeah.
I think we need to think about it as responsible citizens for the reasons you mentioned. I don't know what happens, and I'm praying for the best, but I'm planning for the worst, to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Likewise. It is. Gosh, it's such. I mean, such an uncertain, scary time. I mean,
it
I think we
is.
have the right leadership in place, thank God. But it's just so uncertain. Um, all right, let's lighten things up here while we kind of go for the while we go for the home stretch. You do a lot of hunting. It sounds like bow hunting is your primary
Yeah,
style. Do you guide? I mean, you'd be probably really good at it. No,
I do not guide. I mean, I've
yeah,
taught a lot, as we've talked about. I don't guide. I've never guided. I thought about it for a short period of time, but honestly, I don't have enough time.
yeah,
And well, I should say I could guide and I have time for that, but then I wouldn't have time for my own personal adventures, and I'm selfish in
sure.
that way. And I've got
I
lots of
don't blame
friends
you.
who are guides, and
Yeah,
so you know, and people that aren't aware, it seems like a great life, and I'm not saying it's not, but it's not. You don't have as much time to hunt for yourself as people may think. You're out there
hmm,
helping fulfill other people's dreams, and if
sure.
that's your jam, that's cool, but you're not necessarily fulfilling your own hunting dreams. So no,
No,
I've
that's
never done that.
absolutely a shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
just like a shoe. I mean, like I would feel probably the safest ever out in in the woods with you. I wouldn't feel exposed at all. What adventures do you have planned, if at all, this fall and winter, or even summer,
Yeah,
for that
so
matter?
I was up in, well, let's go back almost a year. So last August, I turned 55 last year. Last August, I had it on my bucket list to go hunt Cape buffalo in Africa. So I went bow hunting for Cape buffalo last year. That was my big adventure last year. Just an amazing experience. Something I would do every year. Um, I would do every year. I would do every year. And I don't know, maybe at some point I'll go on a streak of a couple years in a row. But it was just an amazing experience. Dangerous game. A lot of preparation, a lot of management of emotions when you're there, but just an absolute incredible experience. And I've been to Alaska or Africa a few times, but that was the first time for dangerous game. And then a couple months ago, this spring, went up to British Columbia for spot and stalk black bear. I hadn't done that in a few years. You can hunt them here in Montana, but I had a buddy up there who guides, and so I went up there and hunted
I,
with
I,
him.
I was just up there end of the year. I was with South Slope Outfitters. So we
Okay.
were up in BC elk hunting.
Oh,
That country up there is unbelievable. I've never been
yeah.
to Alaska, so Alaska is probably the holy
It's very
grail. But
it's
even
similar. Yep.
yeah,
It's similar. Yep.
yeah. And you were bear and we saw so much black bear up there,
Yeah.
and you know we weren't seeing any elk, and he's like, guys should have just pulled black bear, and I'm like, well, we didn't, we didn't. So anyway, what were you were hunting black bear up there? Was that good?
Yeah, up near Fraser Lake. It wasn't as good as in years past. Nothing against the outfitter. It was just a kind of an odd spring. And I don't know if the rut was
Hmm.
early or late or what it was, but we saw 2 dozen bears, and me and my buddy saw 2 dozen bears in 5 days. But just nothing. It's the only animal I'm super particular about, like super picky on, just because I've killed
Okay,
quite a few bears, brown bears, grizzly bears, black bears. Like I just don't. I like going, but I don't feel the need unless it's like it
a
just
perfect
kind of
situation.
revs my engine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a great hunt. And then but then this fall I have Columbia blacktail in Oregon. I've never hunted Oregon, never hunted Columbia blacktail. So that'll be interesting. It's kind of an early season hunt. Tree stands, ground blinds, patterning deer. So that'll be interesting. I've never done that, but it'll be a great way to start the season, assuming I don't hunt antelope earlier in August here in Montana. And then I've got, my Montana elk hunt. I choose to hunt whitetail in Montana, vice mule deer. I've killed some mule deer in Montana, but you only get one deer tag for a buck. And so I'm just such a passionate whitetail hunter, as I mentioned, growing up back east, that I just really enjoy the tree stand, the strategy, the whole thing. And then I last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I've gone down to Texas in December to hunt whitetail as well. So
Nice. That's
pretty full, pretty
yeah,
full
that sounds
year.
like a full schedule. So I
Yeah.
just while you were talking, I was Googling Fraser Lake because I think I was there, and I was because
Yeah, just west of Prince George.
we flew into Prince
Yep,
George,
there you
and
go.
we actually hunted right behind Fraser Lake. I think I was there in November of last year.
Oh, they actually do have some good elk, but I think they're kind of in isolated pockets, my understanding, but they have some really
May have
good
been
elk.
September. I don't remember. My
Okay.
memory's so bad. I got 3 young
Yeah.
kids, so I don't sleep well.
Yeah.
But that was probably the best adventure I had been on, and I would love to go back up there. Unbelievable
Yeah, it's beautiful country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Well, look, I took an hour of your time up. I appreciate it. I could have spoke with you for another 3 hours talking about adventure and tactical strategy.
Well, I am a
Uh,
little long-winded, so
yeah, no,
sometimes you don't
no.
get as many questions in.
No, it's okay. It's really good knowledge and things we should all consider and sometimes don't. So,
Well, maybe
um,
we can do it again.
yeah, we will. We will. I'll tap you back in and we'll get you on. Um, I will put in the show notes some resources to your website and your social media account because you do put up a lot of really good, thoughtful posts and product that I think um, people need to know about and should read and listen to. Knowledge from Storms is a great resource. That's yours too. So I'll put all that in the show notes and people should be listening to you and could save their life. So thank you again for all your time and I appreciate it and thanks again for your service. Sounds
Yeah.
like you did some pretty gnarly stuff. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Honestly, I enjoyed the conversation.
Right on. Right on. Thanks for walking the last easy mile with me. If something in today's episode moved you, good. That means there's still something alive in you worth pursuing. But don't let it end here. Send the message, try the thing, start the shift. If this episode helped, like, subscribe, and share with someone else who might be feeling stuck. You never know who needs to hear exactly this. I'm Josh Farahi. Until next time, keep walking.